Next week, Donald Trump, well at this stage anyway, is planning on meeting Kim Jong-un, leader of North Korea. This is indeed an historic day, as hopefully it'll be the start of lasting peace, or at least less hostile relations between North and South Korea, and indeed North Korea and the rest of the world. In this video then, I'd like to take a look at why North and South Korea are divided in the first place, and also take a brief history of Korea as a whole. Now first, I'm going to have to apologise to any Korean viewers over any mistakes I make on pronunciation. I'm going off the phonetic ways I've found to pronounce the names in this history. Any mistakes therefore are mine and mine alone. Well, let's go right back to around 10,000 years ago, or approximately 8,000 years BCE. Now this is the date from which the earliest known pottery has been found within the Korean Peninsula. Now there's a famous book. It's called the Samguk-yusa, or what's known in English as the Memorabilia of the Three Kingdoms, the earliest edition of which comes from around 1280 AD, or 1280 CE for those who prefer the term Common Era. Now this book is a collection of legends and folk tales and historical accounts relating to what's known as the Three Kingdoms of Korea, and we'll come to those a little later. What this book chronicles, however, is that the very first kingdom of Korea, what was known as Goji-seon, was founded by a legendary leader called Tangun around 2333 BC. Now, there actually has been no concrete evidence found of whether Tangun was a real or just a mythical figure. However, that founding date of Goji-seon is an important date in the calendar of both North and South Korea. It's still celebrated as the National Foundation Day in both North and the South, and it's celebrated on October the 3rd each year. Now the historical Goji-seon kingdom was first mentioned in Chinese records around the 7th century BC, and by the 4th century BC it had developed to the point where its existence was very well known in China, and it was also around this time that its capital moved to Pyongyang, what is now the capital of North Korea. In 108 BC, the Han Dynasty, that is the second imperial dynasty of China, they conquered Goji-seon and they installed 4 commanderies in the northern Korean peninsula. Now 3 of those commanderies fell or retreated westward within just a few decades, but one, the Lilang commandery, remained as a centre of cultural and economic exchange with successive Chinese dynasties for 4 centuries, until it was conquered by Kogo-yeou in 313 CE. Now Kogo-yeou was one of the 3 kingdoms which we mentioned earlier found in that book, the Samguk-yusa. The other 2 were Bakje and Silla. Now these 3 kingdoms were the predominant kingdoms between the latter years BCE up to around 600 CE, though there were about 70 or 80 smaller kingdoms in all ruling parts of what is now Korea. Kogo-yeou reached its zenith around the 5th century, and it became a powerful empire and one of the great powerhouses in East Asia. Bakje was a great maritime power. Its nautical skill was instrumental in the dissemination of Buddhism, for example, throughout East Asia and continental culture to Japan. Bakje played a fundamental role in transmitting cultural developments such as Chinese characters, Buddhism, iron making, advanced pottery and ceremonial burial to ancient Japan. Now Silla was the smallest and the weakest of those 3 kingdoms, but it used cunning diplomatic means to make opportunistic pacts and alliances with the more powerful Korean kingdoms, and eventually Tang China to its great advantage. It was Silla, therefore, who led the unification of those kingdoms, and it led to what's known as the North-South States period, around 698 to 926 CE. Now the north was centred around the kingdom of Balhae, which was founded by refugees from the former kingdom of Kogo-yeou, and also Silla in the south. Around 1926 there was another unification, and it led to a dynasty known as the Koryo dynasty, from which Korea's name as we know it today was formed. It lasted around 4 centuries until approximately 1390, when the Mongols invaded and brought it under their rule. In 1392, General Yi Seong-gi established the Joseon dynasty after the coup that overthrew the previous one. King Sejong the Great from 1480 to 1450, he implemented numerous administrative, social, scientific and economical reforms. He established royal authority in the early years of the dynasty, and it was he who created Hangul, the Korean alphabet. After enjoying another period of peace for almost 2 centuries, the Joseon dynasty faced foreign invasions and also internal frictional strifes, beginning around 1592 till 1637, and henceforth Joseon gradually became more and more isolationist and stagnant. And by the mid-19th century, with the country unwilling to modernize, and also European encroachment, Joseon Korea was forced to sign unequal treaties with foreign powers. In 1897, Joseon was finally renamed the Korean Empire, and King Gojong became Emperor Gojong. The imperial government aimed to become a strong and independent nation by implementing domestic reforms, by strengthening their military forces, by developing commerce and industry and surveying land ownership. Russian influence was very strong in the empire until they were defeated by the Japanese in the Russo-Japanese War 1904 to 1905. Now Korea effectively became a protectorate of Japan on the 17th of November 1905. The 1905 Protectorate Treaty having been put together, however, without Emperor Gojong's required seal or his commission. Now in 1910, Japan effectively annexed Korea by what's known as the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty. Now, along with all the other prior treaties between Korea and Japan, this is confirmed to be null and void in 1965. And Japan asserts that that treaty, however, was concluded legally, but Korea has always disputed this, saying the treaty was not signed by the Emperor of Korea as it required, and it also violated international conventions on external pressures regarding treaties. Now, after this annexation, Japan set out to repress Korean traditions and culture, and to develop and implement policies primarily for the benefit of the Japanese. Its officials constructed European-style transport and communication networks across the whole nation in order to extract resources and labour. Continued anti-Japanese uprisings, however, such as the nationwide uprisings of students in November 1929, led to the Japanese strengthening their military rule in 1931. Now, after the outbreaks of the Sino-Japanese War in 1939 and also World War II, Japan attempted to literally destroy Korea as a nation. The continuance of Korean culture itself began to be illegal, and worship at Japanese Shinto shrines was made compulsory. During World War II, Koreans at home were forced to support the Japanese war effort. Tens of thousands of men were conscripted into Japan's military. Now, at a conference in Cairo on November the 22nd, 1943, the US, the UK and China agreed that in due course Korea should become free and independent. And at a later meeting in February 1945, the Allies agreed to establish a 4-power trusteeship over Korea. On August 14, 1945, Soviet forces entered Korea by amphibious landings, enabling them to secure control in the north, and Japan surrendered to the Allied forces eventually on August 15, 1945. Now, the unconditional surrender of Japan, combined with fundamental shifts in global politics and ideology, led to the division of Korea into 2 occupation zones, effectively starting on September 8, 1945. The United States administered the southern half of the peninsula, and the Soviet Union took over the area north of what's known as the 38th parallel. This 38th parallel north is a circle of latitude that's 38 degrees north of the Earth's equatorial plane. It crosses Europe, the Mediterranean Sea, Asia, the Pacific Ocean, North America and the Atlantic Ocean. In December 1945, a conference was convened in Moscow to discuss the future of Korea. A 5-year trusteeship was discussed, and a joint Soviet and American commission was established. Now, this commission only met intermittently in Seoul, but its members, however, were deadlocked over the issue of how to establish a national government. In September 1947, with no solution in sight, the United States instead submitted the Korean question to the United Nations General Assembly. On December 12, 1948, the General Assembly of the United Nations essentially recognized that the Republic of Korea was the sole legal government of Korea. On June the 25th, 1950, the Korean War unfortunately broke out, when North Korea breached the 38th parallel line to invade the South, and that ended any hope of a peaceful reunification, at least for the time being. And after the war in 1954, a Geneva conference failed to adopt a solution for a unified Korea. Now technically the North and the South are still at war, as no peace treaty was ever signed. However, in 2016 it was revealed that North Korea had finally approached the United States about conducting formal peace talks with the hope to formally end the war. And while the White House agreed to those secret peace talks, the plan was ultimately rejected due to North Korea's refusal to discuss nuclear disarmament as part of the terms of the treaty. However, this year, 27th of April 2018, it was announced that North Korea and South Korea have agreed to talks to end this ongoing 65-year conflict. They have committed themselves to the complete denuclearization of the entire Korean Peninsula. And that is why there is so much hope for the talks in the next few days. Maybe once and for all, we can look forward, perhaps in my lifetime, to a unified and peaceful Korea at last. And that is why the states were divided in this very, very brief history of Korea. Feel free to leave me a comment, topic suggestion or question below, or as always, shoot me an email at 5ws and 1h@gmail.com, and I'll say bye for now.